Hi, this is Kamera. My first few minutes with God, day number 268, Ezra chapter 7 through chapter 10. During the year of King Artaxerxes of Persia, a man named Ezra, a scribe, a well versed man in the law of the Lord, of Moses, he came to Jerusalem from Babylon. Scripture shows us the ancestral lineage of Ezra. We find that he is from Zadok's family. It takes us all the way back up to Phinehas. He's from Phinehas' lineage. Eleazar, he's from Aaron's lineage. The king gave him everything he asked for. His whole purpose, Ezra's whole purpose seemed to be to love the Lord law. I mean, he was determined to study God's law, to know God's law. He was determined to teach everybody he knew the law of Moses. That's what he was determined to do. So God grant him favor. The scripture says that the favor of God, the hand of God's grace was on Ezra. So the king gave him everything that he wanted. Well, Ezra is heading to Jerusalem. And with him, those who traveled with him were priests, Levites, gatekeepers, singers, temple servant. In the 7th year of Artaxerxes' reign, that's when they decided to go. And so Artaxerxes wrote letters to Ezra, and he wanted a report of the situation in Jerusalem. He told Ezra to take silver and gold offerings to God. He says, also take silver and gold and voluntary offerings from the people who were in Babylon. Those who used to purchase all the animals, grain, liquids that he needed to offer to God. Is that not God's hand? I'm just saying. He says, anything that's left over, you're free to use whichever way you see fit. So he's also sending cups to be used in the temple. And he tells Ezra, you can take anything you needed for the temple of God. Take from the royal treasury. This is what he tells Ezra. He tells Ezra also to take these decrees along with him to be given to the surrounding provinces. They are to give Ezra everything that he requested. Anything that he requested, whatever the God of heaven demands for his temple. The priests, the Levites, the singers, the gatekeepers, they are not to pay tribute. They are not to pay tributes, customs, tolls, anything at all. So that's another thing that was in the decree. God tells, and he tells Ezra, not God, I'm talking about King Artaxerxes. He tells Ezra to use godly wisdom. Use godly wisdom to appoint godly men who follow God's laws and regulations, godly magistrates and judges. He tells Ezra to teach God's law to everyone, anyone and everyone, and anyone who refuses, they must be punished. Those punishments can be banishment, it can be confiscation of properties, it can be imprisonment, it can be death. Totally up to Ezra. Ezra, he prays to God because what God has done for him, all the favor God has blessed him with. He prays God for the king. Some of the things that were sent with Ezra was like 7,500 pounds of silver, 500 bushels of wheat, 550 gallons of wine. And so there was a record. Ezra had a record of all the people who went to Jerusalem with him. And during this time, going over the records, he discovered there were no Levites who voluntarily went with them. And so the Levites, we know they're helpers of God. They are to help the priests with the godly duties. And so Ezra, he sent 4 Levites, and he told them of God's favor on them. And so scripture shows us the Levites who did decide to come with him. Now Ezra, he was ashamed to ask the king for soldiers and horsemen to accompany them. for protection because he had told the king that God's protective hand was on them, so he was ashamed to ask for protection. So Ezra, he gave orders to everyone that they should fast and pray and humble themselves before the Lord for safety during their journey and to protect them, their kids, and their goods. Scripture tells us about Ezra's journey, the treasures they transported. They arrived safely, and everything was accounted for. There were burnt offerings, and the decrees were delivered. The leaders of Jerusalem, they approached Ezra and told him what had happened and what the people of Israel were doing. They had taken up the detestable practices of the locals, of the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Amorites, the Ananites, the Amorites, the Jebusites, the Egyptians. They took up those detestable practices. Even the men of Israel, they began to marry those women as well. The officials and the leaders, they were the ones who led the way. And so Ezra was so distraught about this. I mean, he just started praying and he fell on his face and just cried out to God. And he confessed that he was ashamed. God, I am ashamed. And he talked to God about the sins of the people. And he gave a recap. We've been down this road before, Lord. And we see how that turned out. We were killed, captured. We were robbed. We were disgraced. But you, Lord, you gave us another chance. You delivered us, you restored us, you revived us. Yeah, you even allow us to come back to rebuild your temple. You protected us with your wall of protection. Once again, Lord, we abandoned your commands. And you gave us specific instructions on your commands and even about marriage. So he says, oh Lord, you're just. We come before you. So while Ezra was praying and made his confessions and weeping, lying on his face, a large group of people, they assembled around him. They gathered around him, men, women, children, and they wept. They wept bitterly. The people, they vowed to put things back right. Ezra simply stood up and went to his room. So this great proclamation went out throughout Israel, Judah, Jerusalem, and the people were ordered to come to Jerusalem. If you don't come to Jerusalem, then you will forfeit your lands, your properties. That's just how serious this proclamation was. People gathered in Jerusalem. And when they gathered in Jerusalem, they were told of their sins. They were ordered to confess and to separate from the locals. So Ezra, as he continued to mourn, he was really down, torn up about the unfaithfulness of the exiles. And so, they were told to make things right, set it right. So there's a record of all the men who had married the pagan women, and some of them even had children. Isn't that something? So there you have it, guys. That's day number 268, Ezra chapter 7 through chapter 10. You have a God-filled blessed day.